Para el Día de la Hispanidad, claro.
Sí, que en Colombia los pasan cuando no son fiestas religiosas, las pasan al
Para el lunes. Para nosotros era el lunes anterior.
Exacto, que era el
Colombia, ¿no?
sí.
Que
siempre se van al
no era
siguiente
el día 12, pero era para nosotros era el lunes anterior y en Colombia el lunes posterior.
Exacto. Sí, no, estaba leyendo sobre el tour del brewery y no, definitivamente no.
Mira, yo he hecho tours de breweries en St. Louis.
Sí, que ahí bueno, están todos los
no soy de beber.
procesos interesantes.
Pero no voy a
Sí, claro.
estar ahí charlando con la gente.
Sí.
¿Pero qué vas a hacer? ¿Quedarte aquí?
Yo creo que me quedo trabajando, sí.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get started with our last two sessions of the morning. And as our panel makes their way, I want to remind everyone, as many of you already know, because you receive our newsletters, we put on a number of events throughout the year. Most of them are really focused on the buy side. That's always been the roots of Media Post, our media buyers and planners, the agency side and the brand side. And those are most of our events coming up. But there is one in New York that we do every January, and publishers love coming to it because it's a raucous event. It's one of our most fun events, and it's our political marketing event. We've been doing this now. This will be our 6th year doing it. And we've got quite a following among the political marketers who come from both sides of the aisle every year to talk about their latest strategies and especially the ways in which they're leveraging digital. And this is an audience, I think, that is ripe for publishers, because one of the problems that I identified when we started doing this show a number of years ago is how much of their money is going to just a select few platforms, especially Facebook. And as their disenchantment with Facebook grows, I think their need and their desire to start moving off of those platforms and start thinking about buying more diversely would be interesting. In January, of course, we're going to be bringing them in to do their post-election report on what they found. And the ways in which these guys have been leveraging, especially programmatic media, is really fascinating. We've had some of the heads of both the political parties talk at this event year after year to talk about their latest tactics and strategies for how they do media buying in-house, especially using programmatic. And it's fascinating what they do. In many ways, they're ahead of the curve. It's interesting, when I program this event, where the energy flows, where people are most eager to be involved. And this branded content panel seemed to my surprise, attracted everybody. More people wanted to be on this panel than I could fit. It seemed to be the topic that a lot of companies want to talk about, even though yesterday, and in my interviews with a lot of publishers in recent years, I've seen a lot of companies, a lot of publishers abandon the branded content model because the challenges of taking on an ad agency model within a publishing structure can be immense. I mean, simply the flow of business, how you figure out staffing, how you create a model that really moves up and down with the market, how you always have to be in a constant pitch mode. These are things that agencies know how to do, and they staff up and build internally for that kind of a market. But are publishers really ready to do that? And that's the question that I bring in here. After several years where we've seen the content studio model grow, and some publishers embrace it, some publishers abandon it, I wanted to get a sense of how these models are sustaining themselves and what we've learned along the way. So to take the lead on this panel, we have, in fact, a veteran of the model, Tara Meyer, who is the VP of Branded Content Sales and Strategy at the New York Post. Before that, she worked in integrated plans, cross-platform plans at Comcast, and before that at Crown, at Martha Stewart, and Rulala. Please welcome Tara and our panel that's going to tell us, do publishers really want to be agencies? Tara, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Great intro. I am very excited. We have such a talented panel here this morning, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know all of them over the past few rainy days here in Austin. So we're going to jump right in lieu of introductions, and just tee it up with how is your team structured? You know, Steve pointed out a lot of publishers do have branded content studios. That's why we're sitting here today. We are very diverse in what we do as publishers and the type of content that we're building on behalf of brands and just, you know, our content in general. So I'll hand it over first to Jacqueline Keller at Dotdash to give us a peek under the hood of how they are structured.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So to your point in terms of the studio model, I would say we've definitely evolved our identity over the past couple of years. We don't really think of ourselves as a studio. We go by Dotdash Creative, and we think of ourselves more as a custom content and branded content team. So we definitely don't pitch ourselves as a studio. Previously, I was at The Atlantic, and we definitely had the identity of a studio. So I would say just in terms of our overall identity, it's a little bit different than other publishers. So we are structured with about 20 full-time employees. That's across design, dev, pre-sales, post-sales that are dedicated to all of our branded content and custom content work. And then there are additional synergies within the organization. We can tap into our editorial video team to create branded content, our email team, and then we have preferred partners, specifically with design and dev, that help us pull those levers when there is a lot of influx of work. So that's the overall structure of our team.
Great. And then we'll pass it along to Michelle. Michelle, your model is a little different. Your site is e-commerce in nature, in a way.
Well, what we do is helps busy women find things to buy online. Our data people tell us our audience is women who want fancy things cheap. So that's what we're going for. But we are small. This is my company. I started it 14 years ago, and we've gotten here and stayed here by being scrappy. So we have 10 full-time people. 2 are dedicated to both selling and executing, and so we staff up with freelancers when we need be. So for example, last year, eBay hired us to do about 600 white-labeled shopping guides, which was great, but I had to bring in a bunch of freelancers to execute on that. Because the next year, they decided they weren't going to do that again. So it's very much like if someone wants us to do something, we will figure out how to get it done, but sometimes it can be a little stressful.
Great. Sam?
Yeah, Sam from Outside. We are a smaller, independently owned brand, and so we operate our branded content out of the marketing department. And so it's basically me and one other person, and then we lean heavily on the editors for ideas, other people in the company. We have a quasi in-house video team that only makes sense for larger budget projects because they're really expensive. And otherwise, we staff up as necessary. I used to be an editor, so I have a bunch of network of editors, freelancers in every platform. So we just scale up or down accordingly as well.
Great, and John, let's round it out.
Yeah, probably a little different, bringing a B2B angle to the panel, but quite fortunate in that we are a global news agency. And accordingly, we produce a lot of video content just as a normal part of our day-to-day practice of covering the world's events. We also have eight HD studios around the world, which certainly help from a production standpoint. And in other regions, we actually white label broadcast solutions. So we have a team that focuses on that as well for other markets, particularly in the European and Asian markets. So we have quite a big staff for that reason. Certainly north of 50 or 60, not including the sales efforts.
Great, and just to give some perspective from my seat here at the New York Post, we do have Post Studios in-house, and we're a team of about 14 people. We typically produce text branded content, going back to what Charlie was saying yesterday with Slate, with text and audio. We do have text and video. We are not doing podcasts right now, but we definitely have a talented and diverse team at Post Studios. Most of them come from marketing, creative backgrounds, but we do have a few folks that did work on that agency side, so they bring that DNA into our in-house studio. So it's worked really well for us. And they actually also serve as our marketing team. So they do have that duality of building out our marketing materials as well as executing on these custom branded content buys for clients. So moving over, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but having work done in-house versus outsourcing, like how do you make that call? It sounds like, for us, I know we pretty much pride ourselves on bringing everything in-house and keeping it there because we want the authenticity of our voice. So does it impact how you define branded content when you're outsourcing versus using your inside talent?
Would you like me to start?
Sure. Anyone that wants to jump in.
Yeah, so we're definitely product first. So anything that we outsource, we've come up with requirements and a clear, we have these product playbook guides to define exactly how the product will be executed. So anything that's being designed or built externally, they have very clear guidelines in terms of how the brand will be integrated, and it always has the final pass from our in-house team. The truth is most of what is outsourced is just custom-rich media, so something that is more brand forward, so to speak, than having that integration. Something that is really, truly traditional branded content is usually done in-house. And again, it comes down to how big is the deal size, what's the priority, what are the key KPIs. But in general, we've come up with a structure that works really well for our business.
Same, I think, if we outsource, usually it's to outsource freelancers that we use repeatedly or sometimes have actually worked for the company before, so they get it, and they have a relationship with the full-time people, and everything goes through the full-time people at the end. But if we can not spend the money to outsource, of course, we hack it together ourselves and keep more money. So there's that.
We have to outsource everything, and generally speaking, I try to hide information from the brands and the agencies about who's doing it and how much I'm paying for it. Unless it's video, because everyone wants to weigh in on video for some reason, and then I have the brands or the agencies saying, "Oh, we really like that video crew, but we don't like that video crew," and it just causes problems.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo Jackie a little bit. We primarily focus on quality, right? So whatever's going to give us the best quality of content to provide to our clients is really where we're going to go. We play a lot in the financial space, obviously, and so we have a lot of financial clients. And we have a real core competency around building that type of content internally and in-house. So in that realm, almost all of it is in-house versus outsourced, but it's a healthy mix. And really focusing on the quality of the output is what's most important.
Absolutely, I agree. So switching gears a little bit, so we create this great content for our clients. Let's talk about distribution a little bit. So what is your distribution strategy? Do you allow these brands to own the content and distribute it on their O&O? Just talk to me a little bit about how, who owns that content once it's created? Do you share the rights with your advertisers?
Yeah. So for us, usually it's co-owned. It kind of depends on the content. So we think of kind of the content in two ways. There's the content itself. So let's say we create a branded content video series. And I have to say this is a little bit of a different shift. I spent 7 years in television where I was at Turner and Discovery, and we would fully own any branded vignette. So this was definitely a shift, and I think it's a value that publishing could offer to advertisers that traditional linear and just linear companies don't do. So if we do create something, we usually have it set up that we own it and they also own it. When it comes to actually keeping the product itself, so that's the content, but the product is kind of the page on which it lives. So if we have a refresh, there's going to be an additional cost of refreshing that destination, so that is not something we guarantee. So while they might own the content, we do not promise that forever we're going to upkeep, let's say, the landing page. So that is a little bit of a shift. So in terms of who owns it, that's usually our approach, is it's co-owned. When it comes to the distribution, it depends on the specific execution. For instance, we just did a branded content video series for Lowe's, and we were hitting a certain amount of video views, and that ran across our site. We actually delivered on it early. It outperformed our editorial video. It did really well. So that's how we distributed that, versus if it's like a branded content destination, we have different levers in place like native inline. We don't tap into social as much as other publishers just because we do have crazy scale. We have about 80 million uniques across all of our verticals. So in general, that's our strategy.
Just curious, why do you think that Lowe's video performed so well? Do you attribute it to the quality of the content? Was it the topic of the content?
Yeah, so good question. We're going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So how we create our branded content is really based on our internal first-party data and insights, and we share that with our brands, and then it helps inform the custom content we create. So the Spruce site is our home and food site. It was formerly About Home and About Food, if you're familiar with the old about.com. And we have 20 years of data because we have been around since 1997, and we really kind of data mine those insights to understand our audience better, and then we could use those to inform our branded content as well. So in terms of the videos we created, we could see that people are very interested in renovations around the kitchen and learning more about how to optimize your kitchen space as opposed to any other area in the home. We could also see that the flight should be in the summer versus the winter. So taking a lot of those insights and even taking insights from our video team in terms of learnings about, let's say, having text on the video or when to, like how long a video should be. We take all of those learnings and we apply it to our branded content. So I think the reason it works so well is the actual content itself was informed by insights around our audience. And then our distribution strategy, we didn't just run it across the entire network. We only matched it to pages that were relevant to kitchen renovations. Which countertop should you have, for instance? And I think that's ultimately why it was. It was the targeting strategy and then also the data that informed the content creation. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, we're a finalist in the Synopsis D Awards for that. So that's really
Congratulations.
exciting.
Yeah, you're very fortunate to have the scale to be able to do something like that. So that's definitely a plus. Michelle, do you have some notes on distribution strategy?
We've been getting a lot of D2C brands, you know, the Everlanes of the world kind of thing, who want us to create content that will lend authenticity to their own social media posts. So they distribute it then. So we create it and they distribute it. We had a huge success with a company called Beta Brand, which like kind of went, it was about, we did a whole bunch of things about women, different sizes of women in the pants. It's a fancy yoga pant. and people like just loved it, and there was like lots of good comments, and they were thrilled. So that's always great. The other thing we do is we license. So if we have a lot of awards, and people want to put the seal on their site. So we license that seal, and that's another revenue stream for us.
Yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, as a small brand, we have a huge issue with distribution. It's probably one of our greatest challenges with branded content at our company is we can create really high quality content that performs really well from an engagement standpoint, but we have a really hard time getting the necessary impressions and readers to the site or viewers to the video. So I'm always looking for new solutions to help me with that because that's our biggest challenge.
Yeah, so a little different. We take a pretty firm stance on the ownership standpoint, and that because we are creating and the content on behalf of the client, we do own it. Reuters owns the content, but included with every deal is the licensing component for them to use it. So it's just an important distinction for us is that we make sure that's clear. It's sometimes confusing for some of our agency partners that. Like, what do you mean we don't own it? I'm like, well, you can do really whatever you want with it, but you don't own it. So it's the same thing, but not really. On the distribution side, we obviously can spread across our native placements and on our owned and operated. You know, we also are fortunate on our news agency side of the business where we do have, you know, literally thousands of publishers around the world that take our content that we produce on a daily basis. We can push it out through that stream, and we don't guarantee any pickups by publishers around the world. But if the content is relevant enough to their audience, they certainly will. So there's some advantages there where we can do that.
Got it. So let's talk about scaling the business for a bit. So I think this differs a lot for all of us as we represent different types of content. It's a challenge that we have with being in news. I mean, we do have a lifestyle component to our content as well. But scaling the business, what is it truly scalable? Is it something that you've been able to? I know, Michelle, you gave the example of eBay not renewing. And so, I mean, I'm sure we've all come across that. Like, have you had success in finding that secret sauce to maintaining the business and growing it and scaling it year over year? Or have you not? You know, talk about successes and failures because we all learn from failures as well. So whoever wants to go first, I don't know if we have to go in order.
Come on, guys.
I'm happy.
Keep making Jacqueline go first.
We could switch sides.
Yeah.
So, for us, is it scalable? So we've been creating custom content for quite some time, ahead of the launch of Reuters Plus, formally into the market a couple of years ago. And, we've seen a great amount of success in terms of retention, but most of it is around quality of the content, to be honest. And that's why we focus so much on it, is that when you understand KPIs up front, and you understand what success looks like from the client standpoint, specifically the client standpoint versus agency, then retention is quite high, other than a strategy change, right? Which is not really the same thing that we can say about our traditional media businesses and those streams, is that they can change quarter to quarter, half to half. Strategies change. So as far as retention, where we've done a good job delivering based on KPIs, we have a very high retention rate. Where we haven't, we don't. And it shouldn't really surprise anyone.
Yeah, I mean, again, our ability to scale is limited by our properties, right? I mean, if you go to outsideonline.com right now, we've probably got 10 native pieces live on our website, and they're all over it. They're on the homepage. They're pegged to a bunch of different channels, yeah. And we're promoting them in our Facebook feed once or twice a day. And so for us, it's trying to figure out that balance. Is that too much for our readers? Is that turning them off? And it does come back to quality. And so our big selling point is that we have literary heritage. That's what the brand has been founded on. That's the way we roll. Our branded content is editorial grade, and as long as I feel like we can keep that up, we're not alienating our readers, but it's always a fine balance, especially when we work with brands outside of our endemic space who want to have more product forward or more salesy type native content, which we know doesn't do well on our properties, but sometimes they convince us otherwise.
We have a fairly large email newsletters that we use to promote, the custom content. But I will say it's hard because the KPIs keep getting harder. They want something super, super creative, but they want it to convert. And sometimes that's not the same thing. So I'm thinking too, there's a shoe brand who wanted us to do this long quiz, which shoe are you kind of thing. And then it doesn't really sell shoes immediately. So, I mean, maybe it makes you think about, maybe I'll get a boot, in a couple weeks when I go to the store, but then you're getting tracked on, did the conversion happen? And then there's complaining. So it's it's a very kind of touchy dance sometimes.
Yeah, when the ask doesn't match the KPIs, right? And do you
when
push
the ask,
back?
right, well, you try, but
right.
How far can you get?
I only asked because we were kind of sidebarring earlier, and there are times where we walk away from deals because the ask is just not realistic with the way the content direction is going. And if we know it's going to perform poorly, it's not going to really benefit anybody. It's not often, but we do, which is kind of scary to say, but we do.
Yeah, I think the harder thing is even when the goalposts change after you've signed the deal. And so we did a branded content thing with a big beer brand, and we had this really cool long-form narrative piece, and they said, it's really great, but we want more beer in it. That's too light a touch. And so they made us tack on a 20-second, basically pre-roll on top of it. And it's crushing its performance. I mean, absolutely crushing it, right? And so now we're on the hook to deliver a certain number of impressions, and so our profit margins just went to, almost nothing.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a challenge when it comes to advertisers wanting bespoke products or never before done, ideas or execution, VR, and it's all these things that are very costly and they have really big upfront, fixed costs the first time you do these things. So how we've been approaching scaling the business is that we can't be everything to everyone. We are not really thought leaders the way other studios are in terms of the types of content they have. Our bread and butter really is in the evergreen content. We help people learn how do you apply for that mortgage? How do I find the best router? What is a smart home? How to cook a quick dinner recipe. So that's kind of the long tail of our content and figuring out how to use the insights and how to tap into the content we have and package it up in ways that are scalable. So we've really focused in on how many products we're offering and then also making sure that everything we pitch, it ties back to content that exists. So we might write new editorial pieces for them or there might be some sort of custom design, but 80% of the products need to be something that we're already good at and we already have the infrastructure for. We're really growing out our ad CMS to make sure that we could do things at scale quickly because that's another thing clients ask for is shorter timelines. I want this never before done thing in 3 weeks and it has to hit these crazy KPIs. So just saying, we would love to help you, but we're not experts in that area. We recommend this. It has been working for us recently.
So you stole my thunder a bit. We scratched the surface. Just talking about KPIs. What are the best KPIs for branded content? How should we be measuring success against these programs? I mean, granted, clients will bring us how they want to measure success, but it sounds like we don't always agree with how they're measuring success because branded content may not necessarily convert immediately. And so what have your experiences been? What do you think the best metric really is in this arena?
Want to start?
It doesn't really matter what I think. It doesn't really matter what I think because if they want, it's what they want is what I have to deliver. So we've actually had to drop the prices on some things because in order to make sure they got a positive ROI. Like the Gap came to us and is like, every dollar we put in, we want $10 back. I'm like, me too. So, I don't know. Tell me how that works. I'm in the wrong business. No, but it's, we've actually tried to figure out some less expensive products that we can offer so that we don't have to hit such a high level of return on sales.
I think that depending on the type of branded content, and again, our team not does branded content, but we're also doing custom ads, and we just recently acquired Investopedia, so there are some performance products like tools, like, I don't know, mortgage calculator, for instance. So I think figuring out what their KPIs and making sure you're recommending what they will actually achieve those KPIs, understanding that a lot of times they do come back and say, no, we would actually like X, Y, or Z, which we know is not going to perform. So I think it's that balance of being perhaps willing to lose the business because you know you can't deliver on that, and at the same time trying to do some education along the way. When I was at The Atlantic, there was a lot of education about how branded content really helps with brand awareness, but it is not really a conversion tool. There are different products that are optimized for that. So I do think we're still in this period where the marketplace has definitely grown over the past 5 years in the arena of branded content, but there's still some education to be done around which specific solutions make the most sense for particular KPIs. And I think showing case studies and past success has really helped us to prove our point, but customers always right to a certain extent, but you also have to prioritize what makes sense for your business.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because we spent a lot of time on that point, you know, where on the RFP it says they want custom content, but then when you see what the KPIs are, they don't align. And so we actually, oftentimes we try to have a conversation with them and be like, you know, what do you really want? I mean, I know you say you want custom content because it's the cool new thing and everyone wants to, you know, content is king, blah, 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 blah. But is that actually really, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to sell shoes? Or are you trying to tell your brand story because you're a new brand and you want to rub up against us because we're cool? Hopefully it's the latter.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I think we're just a little bit different in that the categories that we play in for the most part, and accordingly who we sell content and we create content for, play more in the brand, you know, the objectives are more brand or storytelling versus moving product. So it plays a little bit differently there, but I think we bring up a fundamental question as we're talking about clients, we're talking about agency KPIs, right? And I think one of the challenges, and we've had a couple examples of this, is that, you know, agencies want to transact on custom content the way they do every other type of media deal, which it just doesn't work that way, right? You want to create a 12-part video series, and it's going to have production costs, and there's going to be timelines. And we can include a certain number of rounds of editing into it. And beyond that, there's going to be fees, and that's confusing. We can't just take your standard I/O. We need a statement of work that covers us and all the different costs that we'll take on. So there's different challenges there that work. You know, we had one client where we produced some great content for them in the consultant space. And they wanted to transact on a CPV basis, which was fine with us around videos. We backed into a CPV around the number of video completions that we thought we could get. And a 3-month campaign, we completed delivery in 3 weeks. It's like, okay, do you want us to pull the content down? Are you going to keep paying us the CPV above what you've contracted? This is what you wanted. So, you know, it's a challenge.
Nice problem to have.
But they have to commit the dollars to keep going, right? So otherwise we would have given it to them if we had our regular standard sponsorship stuff. But you chose to transact this way, so let's transact.
So going back to the theme, are publishers agencies, are we leaving agencies out in a lot of these deals? I mean, are you working more with clients directly, or are you still working with the agencies? It sounds like it's a little bit of a mix of both. Where have you had more success?
At Dotdash, we're mostly partnering with agencies directly, just because a lot of it is custom ad products, custom rich media, more turnkey solutions. I will say at The Atlantic, we did work with clients directly because it was more those brand awareness plays. So agencies, I would say like 85% of the time.
We're the opposite. I think we're smaller than you, so probably it's the scale thing. But almost everything is direct client. When we have had agencies, I would like to say that I was complaining about how quickly they pay. It's not fun. So it's my preference to work with the brand because the agencies can sit on money for a long time, which when you're small, the cash flow is not good.
Yeah, we're like 50-50 agency brand, and yeah, I prefer to work with the brand in almost all cases.
I would say 75% or more of our custom content deals involve client involvement, and then a majority of those are maybe executed or contracted via the agency, but it's pretty critical to have that client involvement for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we see a mix of that as well. So just thinking about, you know, we're creating all this great content, whether it's content or, you know, a tool in the case of Jack. Has your branded content studio helped drive innovation and a larger editorial sense for your site as well?
Good start. For us, definitely. Last year, we actually rolled out a new gift guide product, and it performed really well. We executed it with Verizon, Google Stores, and Microsoft, and it's actually helped inform we have a big commerce team that's been growing, so it's actually helped inform their product testing and how we're thinking of rolling out new formats for the site. So I definitely think that in general, anything that is done by Dotdash Creative, we have a little bit more creative flexibility. So in a way, it's a creative playground to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We have all the tools of the site to A/B test things. Like, for instance, you were talking about that challenge with having to put pre-roll. We've gotten requests like that from clients, and we've said, no problem, we're going to put it in Proctor buckets. Let's see how it performs, and then you kind of prove to them that's hurting performance. So I definitely think that for us, being able to do first-to-market custom executions for a client can then inform the innovation on the site as a whole.
I'd say it's about packaging what we have so that we have a regular thing that we can sell. So we do something called Sample Saturday every Saturday, where for beauty companies to partake in. And on Tuesdays, Treat Yourself Tuesday for retailers with a special offer. So we're trying to do more and more of those so that we can sell them into infinity.
Yeah, we have to do a lot of innovative stuff because we have a lot of returning customers, and they really like our native and they want to come back for more. Like we did 4 pieces over the last 2 years on why you should go to Mammoth Lakes. That was really challenging, right? After the second one, I was like, well, what else do you say about why Mammoth Lakes is awesome?
Refer to above.
You know, and the same thing with Michigan. Last year, just to use a specific example, we wrote a really great trail guide for Michigan. It was the best paddling, hiking, and biking trails, and they'd never had that, Tourism Michigan. And so they liked it so much, they came back to us last year and said, what can we do with trails again? I was like, well, you don't have that many more trails, no offense to Michigan. It's just, you know, but so what we did was we took those things and we shot videos and we updated, we did an interactive map and we blew it out in this really nice, flashy, custom landing page and added the video element, and we charged them a lot more money. And now we're rolling out that template to the editors. And so it definitely happens that way at our company.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear, our editorial strategy is to cover the news of the day on a global basis, right? And be the trusted source for other publishers around the world. So I wouldn't say it's informed our editorial strategy. What it has done is spoken great lengths of how our product team integrates the content within our owned and operated platforms and how our users prefer to engage with it. So more on the product side than edit.
Great, and I think, do we have time for one more question for the panel? Do you want to open it up? Okay, great. So just one more for all of you here before we open it up to the floor, and that is, looking ahead, what do you think are the biggest challenges and or opportunities for branded content as we move into 2019? Where do you see the growth? Is it video? Is it podcasting? We've heard a lot of great things about newsletters in the past couple of days here. So what are your thoughts?
I think influencer networks. I think different, more innovative, like ad formats and influencers are inherently very authentic. They're different than celebrities. So I think we're right now working on building an influencer network in-house using our own experts and editorial contributors. So I think influencers will be taking off even more in 2019.
I think it's attracting the audience that wants to buy things. That's what we're focusing on now, is really trying to double down on that, because people want conversion. They don't need, you know, and they can go to Facebook for it. They can go to Amazon for it. They can, so, you know, what do we have to offer? So we have to offer sexy conversion, I guess, you know, at scale, for less money.
We just need new products, new ways to tell stories, new products. If it's in a newsletter, if it's on social only, you know, I got to figure out how to take native off the site, off social, because I have limited resources there.
I mean, for us, it's twofold. It's getting in front of more of the right clients, right, and making sure that we have the right access there. And then we have to figure out a way to contract more easily on these type of deals, because that'll just allow us to execute quicker.
Great, thanks.
We have time for questions.
Hey, Bill. Hello. Sorry. Bill from ESPN. Thanks. This is very informative. Branded content compared to the rest of what you're selling, how big of a business is it, like percentage-wise, for each of your companies?
I can start with that one. I could say it's definitely a huge area of focus for us. We're definitely seeing that on the digital side. It's mostly programmatic, and then direct dollars are funneling into this branded content bucket. So if I had to estimate, probably around 20% of our revenue.
Yeah, I would guesstimate around 30%, and we have a huge programmatic business, so we are trying to figure out ways to allow PG deals and obviously like bigger PMPs to have those types of just turnkey editorial sponsorships, just like putting up their logos on editorial journeys is one of our products. So that's something that I think is going to expand as we figure out ways to better monetize our programmatic business.
I would say 30% as well. So our other things are programmatic and affiliate commission.
Yeah, it's 30% directly to our digital revenue, but it's tied to like almost 50% of the larger digital programs we do. And then where we've had a lot of success is like, okay, if you're going to commit to telling a story with us, let's do it across all our platforms. So like last year, you know, we did maybe 25 advertorials, old school, right? And sometimes they're exactly the same story that ran on the site, but we can convince them to run it in print as well, because we only have a 30% overlap. And then we say, well, what the hell, while we're at it, why don't we interview the main character and for a host-read spot on our podcast? And so we're able to leverage it across all our platforms. So it's really a bigger part of our revenue than that initial number might indicate.
Sure. We still have a healthy / chunky direct business, so that's still the bulk of our revenue on the consumer side of the business. But it hovers anywhere between 25 and 30% on the content marketing side, custom content.
Hey, I'm John Lucas from VentureBeat. Just a couple of questions around turnaround time. Assuming no video is involved, how many edits do you typically allow, and what's a reasonable turnaround time to get it live?
6 weeks for us, 2 edits, 2 rounds of edits.
I would say we mirror that.
It depends on the product. So some products, like the gift guide, we could get up in like a week and a half. There are other products that are more custom that might take 6 to 8 weeks. And then custom-rich media we could do, and again, depending on the client feedback, 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the features that are within the product itself.
Usually, like, it depends what it is. Like if someone's having something last minute they must promote and they have extra money, we will make it happen. So
yeah, then 6 hours.
So I mean, we make it happen if it needs to happen. So, and the edits, I would like to say 2, but it probably goes over.
I have a question about the front end and the sales side here, about how much the ideation is going on your side and how much ideas are being brought to you, but also how you're managing the sales piece. How much of this you're selling, when you're selling, how many people are selling it, and what part of the mix it is for them, because that has a lot to do with regulating your flow.
Right, and I'm happy to take that one on first. So we have a national sales team, a local sales team, and a luxury sales team. Most of the branded content comes from the national sales team, and I'm pretty much partnering with them as their specialist, so I'm helping them bring this to market. In terms of ideation, it's very collaborative. The salespeople know their client very well, and so we tend to have a huddle where we talk about the KPIs, we talk about what the brand is looking to do, but then the Post Studios team is in there with us, and they can help bring us the ideas of, just thinking about the access we have to certain editors or things like that may help us shine a lens on something that would really perform well for a client. So it's just a very collaborative effort in terms of ideation, and in terms of going to market, it's definitely a big part of our sale, but we have to make sure that it makes sense. We're not going to force it if it's not organic.
The ideation, are the brands in the room for the ideation, or is this a
is this sales? No, this is just sales. This is internal.
Okay. So you're bringing the ideas to the
ideation
brands.
is internal. However, we are open to ideating with a brand if they want to be part of the process. It just gets a little sticky sometimes because we really want to own it. They're coming to us for our expertise in creating something on their behalf. And so while there are rounds of review, as we spoke about, we certainly, we're open to it if it has to happen. But for the most part, we don't ideate with the brand.
Yeah, I mean, for us, pre-sale, top-line ideas will come from the outside, from client or agency, and then we brainstorm between our studio team, our sales dev team, to provide initial output on that. And then post-sale, we do encourage a lot of client interaction. We will have brainstorming sessions to get through it, even post-sale, just to make sure that we're hitting on the right targets and checking all the right boxes.
Yeah, we do a lot of the same things. We spend a lot of our time as the marketing department convincing our sales team not to pitch native custom ideas because it's a crutch, right? And so they get an RFP and they really want to win it, and so a novel idea they feel like is the best option, and in a lot of cases, not only is it not the best option, it doesn't align with their KPIs. Plus, it's a ton of work to execute, both on the branded content team and then also the salesperson. Even if we're managing a lot of that content, inevitably the salesperson, depending on the deal, is very involved too, and that takes away their time to be selling, ideas and media plans to other partners.
I mean, it's really important post RFP when you get those that are conflicting, is to get on the phone and understand what really matters, because pitching a custom component probably wouldn't be the right thing in about 65% of the time, right? And so if your goal is to win RFPs, then the more you know about that, the better.
So we're small, so we have just 2 salespeople, but we get leads from a lot of places. Other websites sometimes will partner with us because they need more inventory. So they will come to us and say, let's do this thing together. And so we don't necessarily have to go after that. And I personally have an agent as an influencer. And so we get he brings things from PR companies, which are sometimes easier to work with because they just want the eyeballs. They don't really care what else happens after that.
Hey, Josh Rubin, Daily Dot. What processes do you have in place to deal with unhappy customers? Are you dealing make goods? Are you
meditation?
I think it depends on why they're unhappy. Do you have a specific example of what you have in mind?
No, they're not happy with the results of the campaign. How are you,
It does come back to trying to have a clear picture up front of what success looks like. And again, this is why we have our clients, whether it's agency or client direct, sign an SOW, and it outlines that stuff. And really where they're not happy with is, where we have to bill for extra rounds of editing or going back to the studio because somebody doesn't like that guy's hair. This stuff costs money to go back and redo that. So it doesn't happen often, but when it does, we just have to revert to our T's and C's and try to work through it without using things like legal. But it's tough. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think managing expectations up front for us, I was actually surprised by how much people are dependent on mocks. We've tried to kind of do prototypes instead, but I think showing clients what something will look like and have the ability to actually interact with it before any big investment goes into it is huge, because then there are no surprises. And we've really been training our post-sales team to manage client expectations along the way, even in terms of the turnaround times. We don't have very specific windows. We have an overall workflow because we've been adopting an agile methodology, so even communicating to them how it's going to look. We will hit your launch date, but it's not necessarily going to be on this day that you see the first living stage link. So I think a lot of it is about client management.
How are you managing audience extension and buying up audiences externally, and what you're telling and working with clients in terms of what their guarantees are for your in-house inventory, differences in effectiveness and brand safety, all those issues that surround extensions?
Bueller.
Yeah. I'd have to say on my end, we're pretty large. We have scale. We're about 70 million uniques a month. So typically, our deals deliver within our own walls. We don't typically extend outside. I mean, sometimes on social for promotion or things like that, but it's not something that we typically deal with, just due to our size.
Is that true for most of you? You're satisfying
for
your
the most part.
inventory, your inventory is
There'll
satisfying?
be some client asks that require extensive social extension, and for that, we'll use the likes of Social Flow. Give a plug to somebody on the stage here or on the sponsor list. But for the most part, it's the same thing. We'll cover through owned and operated, but we'll be transparent either way.
For the eBay deal, we had to promise X amount of traffic, so we built that in, what we were going to spend, and I have a vendor who runs my ad buys, and he ran them to get them down to whatever price he can get them to through Facebook or Outbrain or Taboola or whatever we're doing.
Tara's going to be leading the roundtable on this very topic at the end of the morning. Tara, panel, thanks very much. So we're going to round out the morning by talking about the broader mix, how these various pieces and streams add up, and in particular where programmatic fits in, since a whole bunch of new tools have come into place to help pump up both the role and the profitability of programmatic. To take the lead on this panel, we have William Wan, who's the director of the Concert Marketplace at Vox Media. That's one of their tech platform extensions that he'll tell us about in a second. Before that, he was at Fast Company as well as Hearst Digital. So to talk about what the revenue stream looks like now on the ad side, Will and his panel.
Check. Okay. Thank you for the intro, Steve. Cool. So I just want to give a little background. I feel like I have to clarify that Concert Marketplace because I've gotten that question yesterday. Concert Marketplace isn't actually concerts, like musical concerts. It's a publisher-led marketplace.
Bummer.
That is pretty much a startup within Vox Media, and is our custom ad unit that we run across like different publishers. So like we are very much ad-based, and I just want to like give Jason and Van the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Will. Jason Tate. I oversee programmatic and partnerships and development at Digital First Media. For those who don't know who Digital First is, we're a large newspaper holding company, about 75 to 78 papers around the country. Denver Post, I think, is our most notable. Mercury News, Orange County Register, Boston Herald. So a lot of big markets, a lot of tonnage. And basically, I see everything from day-to-day operations of the programmatic ad stack to working with all of the partners in the native space, the outstream space, content rec space, and of course, you know, the PMPs of the world and the Googles and the Amazons, et cetera.
I'm James Van Swearingen. I'm at Fast Company Magazine and Inc. Media and Magazine. Oversee a lot of the same stuff there, really building out our data and audience initiatives in terms of collecting that single ID to help further influence how we market to those customers and you know, help our advertisers.
So I kind of want to, I like the people on this panel right now just because like we have 3 very different publishers. Vox Media itself is a very large publisher with 8 different brands. Jason being at a local media with, 75, 80 brands or something like that. And then Fast Company and Inc. Magazine being 2 brands, a little bit smaller. So just wondering what your sort of ad revenue mix is and like the sales strategy that corresponds with it.
Sure. So we're heavy programmatic. With all those properties, we are generating about 500 to 600 million impressions a month. That equates to about a little over 100 to 125 million page views a month. So out of kind of the direct sales versus programmatic versus kind of the other, lack of better terms, widgets that we have, I would say direct sales makes up about 40% of the revenue. Programmatic probably another 40%, and about 10% goes to like the Outbrains of the world and some native stuff we're doing.
Yeah, in our ad revenue mix, it's heavily direct with some branded content spilling over into that ad inventory. And then programmatic would be a small percentage in the U.S., but outside the U.S., it's which is a decent amount of our traffic, it's very heavily programmatic.
Awesome. On the programmatic piece, I just want to sort of dive into, at a very top level, like how you guys set up your programmatic tech stack, and if you guys want to talk about that, and like how you test your partners, who you decide to keep in your header.
Sure. So, nowadays we rely heavily on server to server just because of the seamlessness of it. We've gotten away from all the tags running in DFP outside of a couple partners. But the header space is definitely, the client side is it's paramount, but it only makes up, I would say, like 5 to 10% of kind of the whole stack. So of course we've got Google DFP or GAM, so stupid. Anyways, I still call it DoubleClick because I started using it in 2008. So we've got EB turned on. We've got about, I think, 6 partners running there. We just had to shut down Comment, for those of you who know or don't know. They have ceased operations. I've got the typical players, the Indexes, OpenX, Rubicon, which I still don't know. Is there anybody in Rubicon in here? I like Rubicon. I love Heather, but, the rates are still small, but they fill a void that we need because, like I said, we have a ton of impressions, and 50 cents is better than 0 cents to me. So we, in EB, there's about 6 partners, and then of course, Amazon's TAM network, we got about another 6 partners in there, and actually I've got about half the partners running in both, and because there's different buckets of inventory out there from the buy side. There's some buyers that just like using, A9 better than they like using AdWords, right? But I would say between TAM and EB, that makes up
trying to think, I just updated my dashboard this morning. It's like 85% of the programmatic ad stack is running through server. And then, like I said, about 5 to 10% client side, and then another, call it 5 to 10% running kind of direct tags. But, you know, with the server side integrations, it's great for publishers because of the billing purposes, right? You know, we're getting one check from Google as opposed to 6 different checks from TAM. Yeah. And, you know, if we have anybody else in the stack. And then it comes down to the reconciliation and accounting, and we have to break down every ad size by platform, by partner, you know. And so, I mean, the reports that I send to accounting every month are just daunting. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Excel slides or rows. So anyway, so sorry, but yeah, server I think right now is the way to go. It's seamless and of course all the PMPs. I would say out of kind of all of that, I didn't really touch on that. You know, the kind of the direct and the private auction side probably makes up about 25 to 30% of our business. But again, we run a lot of those heavily in AdX. But then of course in TAM and some of the partners you can run PMPs on their sides that flow through those same pipes. So collectively, out of the entire ad stack, PMPs probably make up like 30%. So.
Yeah, so we see something a little bit different. We're still very much client-side header-based, but definitely header-based in terms of like how we're operating. We definitely use, we're dipping our toes into all the different versions of server-server, you know, EBDA, and looking at TAM and server-server AppNexus, which you know, I feel like fewer people bring up, but you know, and particularly on AMP and mobile pages for that that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we're seeing actually a lot of growth in our programmatic guaranteed area in the last year, particularly around video, as one would expect. But it's kind of been amazing in how it's basically tripled year over year. I think we had a few deals trickling in, and now it's really heavily there. So we've been focusing a lot on making sure that that programmatic offering is similar to our direct, because we are highly sold through most of the year for both Inc. and Fast Company. And so we've been really kind of trying to make sure that product offering there is as dynamic as possible.
Is that all, I don't want to steal your thunder, but is that all pre-roll video or outstream or in banner? Or?
Yeah, so right now we're working on building out an outstream, but we're mostly pre-roll focused for the programmatic guaranteed aspect. There are a lot of direct deals that kind of piggyback onto that, or display deals rather, that piggyback onto the programmatic guaranteed.
How are you guys advising like your pricing strategy around programmatic guaranteed, direct sold deals, PMPs?
Yeah, direct sold guaranteed, you know, matches or slightly premium to our direct sold traditional, I guess I'd call it, transaction method. And then our PMPs are still, you know, higher than our open, and then opens kind of sits below that.
I would say, at least on our direct side, we have so many properties, I don't know if there's necessarily rate cards in place, but I can say that our average kind of rates for display are generally on direct like $9 to $12 range. I mean, probably typical for most publishers, I would think. As far as programmatic goes, you know, it comes into the yield management side of the business where, you know, you want to fill all the impressions, so you're kind of more flexible on the rate. But when it comes to PMPs, I generally just double whatever our average is, right? Like rule of thumb, if we're getting $2, I'd price my PMPs at $4. Gotcha. Unless the buyer says, well, we need to be at 3, I'll set it at 3. I don't care as long as they're buying. But I think somebody mentioned earlier that like PMPs, you know, they're like, oh yeah, we got this huge budget, we're going to spend all kinds of money, and then that's, you know, end of the month it's $40 or whatever, you know. So,
what would you say the mix is in terms of like PMPs that actually spend a significant amount of revenue versus total PMPs that are active?
So it's interesting. It's like if you go after, sorry, my phone's ringing in my pocket. If you go after like a direct brand that's willing to spend a lot, I think they're more apt to buy. But you know, you can set up with all the DSPs out there, the Trade Desk, Centro, Media Math, you know, you name it. They'll buy more, but when they have a direct campaign, like say, I don't know, GM, right, or Geico or something, they're going to buy like 1% of the time, I feel like, because they're layering on so much data on their back end, and we don't really have a first-party DMP in place. We used to have one, but we've ceased that, I think. I'm still relatively new to the company. Been there almost a year now. But we're not setting up the PMPs to layer on a bunch of data outside of the content, right? Like, so we're local news. We've got weather, sports, entertainment, lifestyle, what's going on, you know, concerts, whatever. So we can package those deals, and they're more apt to buy that way. Like, if you're working with like a Centro, they want all those deals, but they also want to layer on their data on the other side. So it's like, you know, if they say they're going to spend $50,000, they might spend $5,000.
That's always what I find to be the hardest is you don't know who they're trying to target, so you can't get a high percent, you know, fill rate of total impressions that are going to them, because otherwise you just filter that same audience towards them so they get better performance and hopefully better match rates. But yeah, so we end up seeing a small percentage of our total active deals in any given month actually end up spending probably about 10% of those deals actually spend something, you know, worth reporting.
Right.
So yeah, so the same thing on the Vox Media side. So like I'll just kind of jump in and back up and give my side of the piece. So Vox Media programmatic probably does about 30% of total revenue. Sorry. And the PMP space has actually grown quite significantly over we do a lot of PG comparable to our direct sold deals. Like Google is one of our clients that strictly runs through programmatic channels. Does a lot of PG, started running in the PMP space. And with Vox Media and Concert marketplace revenue total, I think our PMPs are close on a monthly average, probably like a 7-figure number, and we've seen that grow quite significantly.
Can you make me any introductions to those partners?
Just to take it back a little bit. So when I think about the ad revenue mix, I'm also thinking about the ad products like the display banners, pre-roll, outstream, everything like that. The tech platforms that we deliver through, so programmatic channels or direct. The ad formats for any custom units, and also data and measurement tools. How are you guys approaching the data and measurement side?
From data being like who our users are, or data being like how they're on our sites? Stuff. Both. So of course we have GA. I mean, that's kind of our Bible with DFP, of course. So we're outside of that. We're not. I mean, well, we use Parsley and you know, some of those other tools, but really drilling down, you know, we rely on all of our partners' reporting tools. So if they're wrong, you know, it's kind of up to myself and our ops team to call them out. You know, generally, you know, if we get paid and the numbers just aren't matching accounting, it's pretty quick to call it out, and then I got to go back to them and, you know, hash it out. But you know, DFP is our Bible. It's our ad server. So, you know, we rely heavily on those numbers. But at the end of the day, you know, we're still kind of old school in that we put everything in Google Docs and Excel, right? So I don't know if that really answers your question, but
yeah, on the reporting end, it's kind of similar because you do have a whole bunch of partners. You really do need to work with someone who can extract that data, transform it, and then store it for you so you can make it actionable on a reasonable time scale. And that's something we've kind of struggled with over time, particularly as, you know, you add more and more partners to the header. You know, that's kind of the beauty of some of the server stuff is one beautiful dashboard. I mean, the Amazon one is slick, but doesn't give you much information as far as I've seen. But it's really nice to get all that information in one spot. And so when you can have DFP kind of being that central repository as well, it makes it really simple. So adjusting the time scale, gathering the data, and verifying the data has always been kind of a challenge. On the other end of it is really making sure that, you know, you're making the best decisions for the organization. So we're very heavily direct sold, and we have a lot of branded campaigns, so making sure that doesn't compete, but we're also maximizing revenue from a perspective where it's not necessarily tied back to that exact impression, but rather a larger bulk deal, and we have conversion rates to hit to get people down to the pages to actually read those branded campaigns. You have to really take kind of a forward-thinking, holistic view in terms of that. So you look at the inventory that's available for your direct sold, and your current programmatic price, and then also estimated value of each impression for the conversion that will come back to a branded view. So you kind of push out inventory that you know you have and try to take those high dollars as soon as possible.
So I wanted to sort of jump into your sort of role of head of data science. So I wanted to ask you, so what types of data are you working with, and what are you taking in, and like what is the eventual output? Like, is it something that clients can activate on?
Yeah, so the goal is to really make a data product for our customers. So the first step is really just making sure our data governance is really strong in terms of I think someone brought it up earlier in the conference. What's a page view? We have 3 analytics platforms on the site at the moment, so GA, Omniture, and or Adobe Analytics rather, and Parsley. So making sure that the reports from Omniture match GA are fired at the same time and match Parsley's reports is a big point of contention, making sure you're getting all those inputs and outputs flowing nicely. But our ultimate goal is really to kind of make sure we get a better picture of our user. We do have a good amount of declared data from our awards programs and events. So we do get to see those very loyal, active users a lot, but right now the pipes aren't working, and that's kind of making that central repository that you can activate for clients, you can activate for a B2B product, and you can activate for our internal marketing teams is something that is kind of the main focus of that, and making sure that we can bucket those users appropriately.
Gotcha.
Sorry. I was going to say, to add to that, so I failed to mention that, so we're a large newspaper company, but we have the digital subscription model too, so we're consuming a lot of that data through our quality users, and I think we're leaning more towards keeping our loyal users as opposed to the flybys, right? And we're kind of strategizing around how do we monetize those audience differently. I think a lot of the bigger publishers that are doing it are all kind of in the same boat where it's like that user is we're going to put an average revenue per user an ARPU on that person versus that person, right? So because we know that this user is a loyal, they're spending whatever $5.99, $10.99, $9.99, whatever it is a month. So we're not going to bulldoze them over with all kinds of outstream players and content recs and et cetera. So it's more of a clean thing, but we know that through the data, and it just delivers a different experience.
Yeah, I kind of had a question because that's something I think a lot of publishers long to do is have a dynamic ad experience, right? Not just in terms of which ads are showing up, but do you have that interstitial when they come in, or or that big 970 by 250 versus 720 by 90, based off the idea that hey, you're actually going to generate revenue from them, from events or from a subscription, or from activating a third-party product or reading more branded content, or brand content for your partners or advertisers rather. So I'm just curious, is that something you guys are working towards as well?
Yeah, we're kind of testing, right? I don't think we have it figured out necessarily. We work with some partners that do some of the interstitial type stuff, in Undertone. Holly's here, if anybody knows Holly. They have great like screen grabbers and fun creative that's actually brand safe, and we do some of that in some markets, and we might put a frequency cap on it because there's other markets that don't want any of that. So we're kind of at the mercy of the publisher in that specific market. If they go to their website and they're getting pounded with ads, they're going to say take these off. But then we say, well, it's $50,000 a month or $100,000 a month or whatever it is. Then like, oh, okay, leave it on.
Well, I guess the question I had was more around like, are you making a dynamic experience relative to what you know about that user?
Testing. I mean, we don't, like I said, we don't have it really figured out, but I don't know if anybody really has it figured out, and that's why we test and we fail and we, move on.
It's all about those tests
right.
and monitoring it. Chorus was doing something with that, or like didn't Vox do something around that with concert and chorus and all that?
Not that I
Okay.
know of.
I always think people are light years ahead, and then I come to these conferences, I'm like, okay, we're not too far behind. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, like we're always testing at Vox, and the product team definitely does a lot of different things. They could be.
I know you guys have a stellar product team over there, so that's why I thought you. Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to ask, but I just wanted to move the conversation towards platforms real quick. So like AMP, Apple News, like how do you guys monetize those platforms, or if you do at all?
Yeah. So AMP has really taken off in the last 6 months for us. And of course, Google's got some policies and regulations around what you can put in there, but we're finding it's actually a little bit more lax than you would think. I know some publishers throw like 4 to 6 to 8 ads on AMP pages. We've seen literally in one market, our page views go from, you know, like 100,000 to I think last month, like I think it was like 20 million page views on AMP, which is huge. So we're like, all right, how do we monetize it? Because we only had, you know, the only problem, the only caveat is you can only monetize with AdX, right? So, but there is no law against adding multiple ads without, you know, crushing the user experience. But you can also, so we're in talks with an Outstream player on AMP, which we can do, well, everyone can do, and then even native. So, you know, finding out that different ad mix of, you know, so we went from 1 ad unit to I think we're doing 2 ad units now, plus a native unit, plus an Outstream unit. So 4 total units, but at 20 million page views a month, I mean, just turn that into dollars, you know, we're going to make from, you know, whereas opposed to, you know, 10,000 a month to, you know, potentially 50,000 a month on that one property, which is huge. You know, that's $500,000 a year. So.
Yeah, we've been leaning heavily into AMP as well. We have Apple News. We test, you know, every now and again on Facebook Instant Articles, but we found AMP to be really nice in terms of you can kind of run your, you know, you can actually start running some server stuff. You can put unique units, and it's really only the same limits of DFP are on there, and they actually maintain those components within the AMP library pretty well. So, you know, they didn't have flexible sizes like initially when we went on board, and now they do, so now you're able to get a little bit more competition in there. And so kind of as they've been rolling it out, it's actually been proving like, hey, this is like a really valuable platform for us, not only because you can get however many ads on the page with your regular DFP limitations and AdX limitations, but also, sorry, GAM limitations, but you can also kind of put more creative ad units. So they have a flying carpet module that mimics a parallax effect, and you can serve an ad behind it, essentially, to get that kind of parallax ad unit, which is very popular with a lot of our customers because it does have a high click-through rate. And it's fast, right? And so you just get more page views on mobile, and I think they're, you know, and more people see it. So, I mean, yeah, we've been leaning into that heavily because it is customizable to an extent. It meets our basic mobile needs, and you know, we're not really limited because you can plug in other partners through other ways that are you know, not necessarily your standard waterfall tag, versus, you know, some of the other platforms have been restrictive in terms of our current operational workflow versus you know, what we like to do with our programmatic stack.
So we're in Q4 right now, and we all know that this is a very busy season, a very busy time for everybody, and like revenue goals are highest in Q4. Like, what are some levers and tools that you guys use, and if you do, if you needed to sort of
jack up revenue a little bit?
Yeah.
So we have, I mean, obviously you can set your price floors in AdX, which kind of govern, you know, the whole waterfall, I think, at the end of the day. I think if you stand firm and just tweak them up, you know, even a quarter or 50 cents, like, you know, it seems small, but in at least our reality with 600 million impressions, that can add up. That was like, that's the first go-to. So at the end of each quarter, you know, budgets get spent, et cetera, and through the quarter, in Q4, it really starts, I think that second week of October, so like last week, I really started spending go up. So I tweaked the rates, literally just like in 4 price floors. You know, like don't overcomplicate it and have 300 price floors on different types of inventory, you know, keep it simple. You know, you start there, and then I think, you know, with the midterm elections coming up, there's going to be some political spending going on here in the next couple weeks. So you can jump on board there and really, the thing is you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, right? So you can take certain types of inventory and sparse it out differently, or different content, you know, verticals. So jump on the political bandwagon, but then you have to also realize that in December, spending kind of stops mid-December, right? When everybody starts taking off for the end of the year. So you want to kind of front load everything and, you know, get the dollars while they're spending. And then mid-December, you know, go back to your price floors and almost cut them in half, really. And that's what I've seen the last 10 years, give or take, how spending, you know, happens. And then we were in the Q1 and you know,
Yeah.
the rates are
Those seasonal flows can be killer in some ways if you're not adjusting. But so in Q4 we're pretty much sold out on Inc. and Fast Company direct. So what little programmatic is coming in there is usually from First Look for us. And so those rates are really nice. And so even though we have a lot less inventory flowing through programmatic, the buyers are really heavily buying through the First Look inventory.
Yeah,
So we just kind of make sure
I failed
those,
to mention that, but you're right.
Yeah, so we just make sure that's open to all the partners that we want to be seeing on our site or don't want to be seeing on our site if they're buying through us directly, and making sure we're tweaking that appropriately with our optimized
Yeah, and I would also, so like another lever to that too is, go to your partners that are going to spend more, right? Like, I know back to, Undertone, they do a great job, and have great units, and they're going to be spending a lot of money in Q4. So it's like, I'm going to shift impressions to them knowing that it's decent brands, right? It's not going to, even though some publishers don't like it, I'm going to say, well, at the end of the day, here's whatever, $100,000. And then, so shifting that lever to partners that know are good, that's another big lever, I guess.
So, I mean, while, First Look is definitely a big part of it, what I end up doing a lot in Q4 is helping identify places that we can optimize our direct sold so that it's more efficient. So we're potentially selling, higher priced units that are performing just as well, or if not better for the clients, which frees up some additional, inventory for non-guaranteed programmatic in the US. And so that's kind of where I'll end up spending a decent amount of time, is helping the direct team just make sure that every dollar is maximized so that we can get more opportunity to get those additional, non-guaranteed dollars that are still coming in at a decent CPM.
So I just want to sort of, so whenever you make these like tools or changes and you do these tweaks, like I'm sure like there's some internal discussions that happen. How do you guys sort of navigate those conversations?
I generally just do it and ask for forgiveness later. It's not a great thing to do, but at the end of the day, I'm managing, I am the director of our programmatic business, right? So if I can't do something and get slapped on the wrist, from time to time, I go back to my management and say, like, look, I can't operate our business if I'm getting slapped every day, right? So I generally just do it, and a lot of the levers are in DFP, and you just go in there. Like I said, like keep the stack generally, confined and simple. So when you need to make tweaks, it's not going to take you 2 days to go in and adjust, thousands of line items.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of definitely a lot or a little bit of do it and see if people notice, and then they usually don't, and then they see increased revenue, and you're like, hey, look, like this is good, and then they're like, oh, that's why I was seeing that. But yeah, it is kind of conferring with the partners within the organization, because there are a lot of stakeholders on revenue, and making sure that you're not really messing up an advertiser's campaign. If there's 100% sold sponsorship and you put something above it, and they see someone.
I'm not saying, I'm not taking over direct, and I'm not just throwing all kinds of new units on the page. But when it comes to tweaking a partner, or
oh yeah, definitely,
or if they,
to your discretion.
like, what? Why are we getting all this in-banner video now? Like, well, you're going to spend $200,000 this month, right? Like, oh, okay, I guess we can live with it for this month. So
if the revenue justifies it, usually it's fine, as long as it doesn't hurt the user experience extensively to the point where they're not coming back.
Right.
Do we have time, or do you want to go into questions?
I would like to go to Q&A if anybody has any questions. Back, right in back here.
How much reference you guys giving to Better Ad Standards, the Coalition for Better Ad Standards?
Say it again.
Sorry, mic check. I'm Andres with BounceX. I was just curious how much attention the publishers are paying to Coalition for Better Ads, Better Ad Standards.
Yeah, so we've signed on with the Media Trust to kind of, Google does generally a decent job, at flagging stuff and policy violations, and, it goes directly to our ops team. But we also circumvent a lot of the ads through the Media Trust, which is great. And that keeps our standards pretty much in line with, as long as it's not like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they're all generally pretty good, right? But we also get we get a lot of users that'll, submit something, and you can obviously tell they got retargeted. you know, there might be a half naked person on their page or something. It's like, well, what websites have they been going to? And they think it's, you know, our fault that we deliver them those ads, right? So it's like, all right, well, we'll block that URL in AdX or something, and generally it works itself out there. But yeah, I mean, we rely heavily on the media trust and Google, really.
Yeah, for our direct sold, we double check all of our load times and all that to make sure that they hit the better ad standards. We're trying not to put video and banner, no sound on, all that stuff. I mean, it's basic, you know, you want users to like your site, and if they don't, they're not coming back. They can go get, you know, similar content from other providers. So, I mean, we take it seriously, but not to, I mean, it is kind of like it is run by a large, or led by a large corporation, so it's not, you know, not self-serving, but, you know, we appreciate it and we understand what they're trying to do, and that's something we definitely respect, but it's not dictating how we run every aspect of our business, but it does kind of lead us with guiding principles.
And another thing to add to that too, I think the average kind of consumer of really any websites still probably doesn't know even what retargeting even is. They're like, oh, why do I keep getting these ads? I think people, the last couple of years, will probably start buying into it, but like my wife, who's not in digital media, right, she's like, I just keep getting hounded for all these baby clothes. I'm like, well, have you been going to like Carter.com or whatever those baby clothes are? And she's like, oh, yeah, that's why, you know? So I think there's still a lot of people out there that don't realize they're getting retargeted and seeing the half-naked person all the time.
How are you defining and measuring user experience? When do you know what negative impact certain practices are having? How are you measuring it? And are there some red flags that you've already responded to?
I would definitely say time on page is a big one for us. I mean, obviously, if you see a less than 5-second visit rate jump, like in a given month, it's probably someone slipping through that is, you know, slowing down the page load or giving a bad experience. Like that's a clear red flag in my mind if you see a spike in that. But yeah, I was talking to someone here about how to better measure that as a publisher, because you know do want to provide a good experience for you know, your UX around new ad units in particular, because they can be intrusive at times. So it's, you know, independent user testing to make sure ad products look good, seeing if you have a big drop over time for particular sets of users, and then obviously if you see you know, people not spending a lot of time on page or viewing the second page.
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, we use the GA heavily. We have actually a director of audience development at our corporate office, kind of overseeing our whole entire footprint, and he relies on tools like Parsley and Flurry and GA, and he's really kind of, you know, firing back, you know, stuff at us like, hey, did you put a new user on our latency on our pages, or time spent has dropped, you know, 5 seconds or whatever it is. So we'll kind of kick it back through the operations team.
You actually have an experienced czar.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, who was an editor, right?
Yeah.
He was a writer.
Yeah.
So he understands it from that side of the house, and he knows generally what's good for the users.
Yeah,
we think he does anyways.
It also comes back to the lifetime value of the user, right? You know, you need to keep that positive UX to continue to make money off the ads from that user.
Yeah, we definitely get it from all sides of the business. So on the product side, they're always looking at page latency, and they're constantly monitoring that. So like if anything truly affects that, then they red flag it right away. We get it on like the analytics team side, where they're looking at the bounce rates, they're looking at the time spent on page. And then like our engagement editors, actually on like the editorial teams, because our users aren't afraid to like call us out and really like lay into us if like we're providing a bad experience. And we get it all the time in like our Slack rooms, so we hear it.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool to see what Jason's working on evolve, that idea of a more customized user experience where you actually understand the ad experience that best maps against your
yeah, because if we're gonna make, you know, like I said, $10 a month off of a user on a digital subscription, right, we can justify taking a couple ads off the page and not pound them with it, right?
Right. One final word about you brought up briefly. You brought up Apple News do you talk about it briefly as both a distribution venue and what the limits on monetization have been so far? Any of you?
we do a ton of Apple News inventory, especially for Vox.com. The monetization, to be completely honest, hasn't been there, and we sort of like use the inventory as like in our like inventory, we look at it holistically. So like if we're giving added value on a plan, like we'll bundle Apple News impressions, newsletter impressions, and then general like O&O, and that's like sort of how we've been not monetizing it, but utilizing it.
Yeah, pretty much the same. We utilize it, but it's not our number, like, it's not our go-to. I think our focus has been more on AMP, personally. And I honestly just haven't put any focus on trying to monetize Apple News yet, but I'm going to write that down and get on it.
I'm about in the same boat, but we do notice it's, growing month after month.
I will say that, so like, on the concert side, we work with NBCU because they're a founding partner of Concert with us, and NBCU is the sole reseller of Apple News inventory. So like NBCU's code team does sell a platform play, so they package Apple News with Concert, and I think I forgot like their other third partner that they do a platform buy, and that's how they monetize Apple News. And then once they sell that deal to whoever the client is, we sort of do the same thing on our side if we have a deal already open with them, and then we just take the same assets.
Hey, John Lucas from VentureBeat. What do you guys do, if anything, for users with ad block turned on?
We don't monetize them.
So for a while there, we were actually using them to generate additional page views for native content. And now we've kind of started to look at it and do some new testing on it to potentially, we want to respect the fact that they're, opting out of ads, opting out of additional tracking. So we're trying to provide additional ways for them to achieve that similar experience. So potentially partnering with companies that will provide an ad-free experience across a number of sites, or potentially giving them doing the cat and mouse game with the ad block overrides. Yeah,
and I think, at least for our properties, we're newspapers, so we're traditionally older. Our users are generally a little bit older and not, I guess, tech savvy to put ad blockers on, so it's probably less than 5%, and we just aren't really on it. It's kind of backburnered. I mean, we need to know how to do or how to monetize them, but it's very small, so it's not a lot of focus.
And I'll just clarify that we don't monetize them with ads, but we use Outbrain as our content rec, and they have a solution that still serves the widget to ad block users.
We're considering asking for a user registration and allowing the user then to have no ads, but in trade for their email and registration on the site.
We've experimented with that as well, but we also found that they can convert pretty nicely for branded content experiences as well.
We have another one?
Sure. John Alacqua, EMX Digital. Great presentation, boys. Very proud of you all. How do you guys go about evaluating and setting up individual demand partners, sort of respective of their individual capabilities? And is that practical, Vox, given that you have 300 O&Os, and Jason, you've got 80, to sort of customize that setup? How do you go about it? What do you think about when you're doing it?
I'm the wrong person to ask. The person to ask is Dave Pond.
I've been texting with him.
Yeah, I know.
What about you, Jason?
So with the scale that we have, we generally like to have somewhat seamless, but different partners bring different value, I think. Some rely heavily on mobile campaigns, so we'll just target just mobile, or others are better in desktop, so we'll give them desktop. I personally will open up the floodgates for anyone and let them prove the value. Show me the money, right? It's prove me you're going to be a good partner, and I'll give you everything we got. But at the end of the day, I've got a goal to hit, and the best rate wins at the end of the day. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it does.
We're going to answer the rest of the questions in our roundtable that shall follow up in 2 seconds. Will, panel, thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
So we're going to break to our roundtables. First will be Video 3.0 that Josh is going to lead, and that's over in that corner. Then branded content studios with Tara, and that is going to be, is that right here? And then finally, driving ad growth, and that'll be with Will back there. You'll see the signs on the table. So grab a round table.